You're listening to Big World Network.
War of the Gods, Episode 1, written by Raymond Sardella and J.D. Rice, read by Elizaina. The wood was silent and the moon low as the scout crept quietly between the trees. The forest was dense, the moon rays cracking through the canopy of trees only at irregular intervals. These shimmering rays of light the scout avoided. He dashed from tree to tree, body low to the ground, stopping before coming near any point of light. His course was indirect, seemingly random, but slowly his cloven feet brought him near the center of the great wood. If any other creatures stirred in the night, they noticed him not and made no sign at his passing. He was alone with the grass and the trees and the crumbling leaves beneath his feet. The scout was short by human standards, the height of only an adolescent boy. His torso was as strong as any man's, but hairless, save the creeping of curly brown hair that started at navel height and descended down to his fully covered legs, ending only when they reached his hooves. Of all the creatures who roamed this heavenly forest, the satyrs were the most nimble and sure-footed. This scout was no exception. He moved with a swiftness and quickness that could only be matched by the keepers of the forest, whom he had come to see. In the center of the wood, the scout came upon a small brook, which bubbled and flowed towards the ravine that cut the southernmost part of the forest off from the rest of the wood. In a single leap, he cleared the stream and landed gracefully on the other side, before tramping his way southward, following the flow of the stream for some miles. The moon was high in the sky when he finally reached the meeting place, a tightly packed circle of trees just north of the great ravine. "I'm here," he whispered, pressing his body against the largest tree. His lips nearly touched the cool brown bark. "You can come out." At first he saw nothing in the failing moonlight. The tree stood just as it had when he arrived, straight and strong among its many brothers and sisters. But then, slowly, the tree began to change. The moonlight bent and twisted around its form, looping round and round in a great circle. Tiny specks of dust, like gathering gnats, began to swirl with the moonlight, scattering and condensing back and forth and back again. Then, just as quickly as the change had begun, the tree grew suddenly dark, and before it stood a woman with brown, barky skin, robed only in leaves, tall and strong and graceful. "You should not be here," the woman said, staying within the shadow of the green tree that was both her home and her very self. "I could not wait," the satyr said, squinting his eyes to see the expression on the woman's face. The darkness made her countenance unreadable. "All things can wait, if you let them," she said, stepping sideways then backwards, putting half her body behind the trunk of the great tree. "Leave me. You have no business here." "Please, my lady," the scout said, bowing slightly, "but my business is expressly concerned with you and your great wood. Would you not hear my message?" "What message could a spy of the Titans bring the Dryads?" the woman said, pulling more of her body behind the tree. Now only an outline of her head remained visible. "Only this, fair one," the scout said. "The army of my masters is on the move. They mean to take the eastern celestial plains, which the Olympians have long held as a buffer against the Father's throne. Neither the long grass, nor the rolling hills, nor the politics of the Titans and their children are of any interest to me," the Dryad said, slipping totally behind the tree now. "Then perhaps this will," the scout said, moving around the tree to face her and finding only a tangle of leaves and branches. He then swept around the other way, faster this time, and again found nothing there. Exasperated, The scout pulled a knife from his belt and moved to ram it into the tree. A hand shot out from the darkness and held his wrist fast. From the shadows, the dryad spoke again. "Do not try the patience of my people," she said. "Others have paid dearly for harming us and our wood." "Know this, lady," the scout said, wrenching his wrist free from her grasp. "You shall pay dearly for continuing to block the southern entry to the celestial plains with your great wood. The Titans know how you have long harbored Artemis and offered her safe haven in your wood in times of need. Their patience for your interference is at an end." At these words, the forest grew suddenly dark. The scout looked up and saw that the branches of the great circle and surrounding trees had pulled slightly around him, blocking out the light of the moon. As he stepped away, the arms of the trees seemed to follow him, reaching down towards his body, creaking and snapping as they went. Their great shadows fell over his small form, and he raised his knife once again in defense. "Artemis has always been a friend of our wood," the nymph said from the shadows, "more than we can say for the Titans or the other Olympians. Why now is our presence in this region so intolerable to your masters? Why now do they threaten the peace of the wood? It is said by many in our camp that the Father has awoken new creatures to battle the Titans' army," the scout said quickly. "Beings of frightful power and great light. The Titans will not stand to have their dominion threatened. They are hell-bent on winning this war now, before the newborns gain the strength to bolster the Olympians' forces." "If they threaten our home, then we shall bolster the Olympians' forces," the nymph said darkly. The scout suddenly felt his legs had become immovable, and looked down to find them wrapped tightly in thick roots. "Have I not always come in peace to your wood, with words only of friendship and warning?" he stuttered, struggling against his bonds. "My people have always loved both tree and flower, root and berry." "Fauns and satyrs, children of whom, I wonder?" the nymph said, ignoring the scout's pleas for mercy. "Children of the Olympians? Spirits of their making? No, you share no relation to the dryads or naiads or nymphs of old. What then? Children of Echidna, mother of monsters? Are you brothers of centaurs who cut our wood for sport? Or the fell beasts who suffocate life wherever they roam? Or are you of the demons the Titans breed in secret with the help of Hades the traitor? Please spare me," the scout begged, letting his knife drop to the ground as the roots and branches tightened around his body. "I came only to warn you." "To warn or to threaten?" the dryad said, stepping out from the shadows and picking the satyr's knife from the ground. She held it in her hands for a few moments, examining it, before placing the hilt in her fist and pressing the point against the scout's throat. "Your visits have been tolerated, but no more. Do not show your face in our wood again, or you shall end up like them." She then pointed the knife away to a nearby bundle of branches. Above them, the canopy opened enough to let the moonlight through, revealing the mangled bodies of several less fortunate scouts and soldiers from the Titans' army. Most looked as though they had been crushed and pulled apart simultaneously. "I will say it again," the dryad said. "You and your kin are no longer welcome here. And if the Titans dare to move against our wood, their forces will face the wrath of the tree spirits and the protection of the goddess Artemis. Do not test my word." "Understood," the scout said, then dropped to the ground as the branches and roots released him. When he stood again, he found the wood nymph gone and the trees silent once again. Not bothering to look for his knife, he scurried quickly away back the way he had come. When he was gone, a soft breeze blew through the forest, carrying a cloud of gnat-like dust away to the north, towards the celestial fields still held by the Olympian army. Sunlight was just starting to creep through the windows of the great hall when Philomena entered by the large double doors. Up and down the hall, arranged in perfect symmetrical rows, were the bodies of fallen Olympians. The number of gods and goddesses who had been killed in the war with the Titans was small compared to the number of spirits and angels lost since the war began. However, the small number of Olympians made each death weigh all the more forcefully on their shoulders. Philomena had often found Aphrodite and Zeus walking these halls alone in the early morning and evenings. On this morning, however, she was looking for someone else. A tall figure dressed in light combat gear stood alone near the back of the hall. He stood over the body of a particular Olympian who had a childlike appearance, though Philomena could not now recall the child's name. The boy had died in the early days of the conflict with the Titans. The figure who now stood over him looked down on his face with a curious expression, as if unsure whether or not he believed the child truly existed. The angels had met no Olympian children since joining the army of the gods. Philomena slowly made her way past the rows of bodies and came to the man's side. Neither said anything for a few moments, though the man did offer her a short nod before returning his gaze to the child. Philomena watched the child as well, trying to remember his name. She had made it a point in recent weeks to begin cataloging the history of the Olympians' war with the Titans. Zeus tolerated her work because he saw military value in evaluating their victories and losses. Philomena, on the other hand, simply believed that history was an important part of understanding the Father's plan for creation. She looked back at the man at her side. The war had taken a toll on him, as it had on all the angels. When the Father created their race, he had given them a paradise to call home. At the same time, he placed a yearning in their hearts to seek out his great throne. The vast majority of the angels had chosen to take the long and perilous journey through hostile territory to meet their Creator for the first time. In exchange for their sacrifices, they had been given renewed purpose and a new list of challenges. They had been sent to war. No angel bore this burden more heavily than the man who stood at Philomena's side. Theocles was an archangel, one of the most prominent angels within the ranks of the Olympian army, permitted by Zeus to lead large numbers of angels into battle. Theocles' forces had seen a number of skirmishes in recent months, losing many soldiers along the way. And unlike the Olympians, the angels did not simply pass into an unending sleep when death came upon them. The life of an angel disappeared entirely in death, leaving nothing behind but a broken body and the tears of surviving friends and comrades. Philomena herself had taken many scars in battle, both from the weapons of the enemy and losses of the heart. Theocles, as a leader of their battalion, felt the responsibility of each death. Thankfully, Theocles continued to lead with conviction and strength. It was those very qualities which had brought Philomena to his side today. "What is it you need?" Theocles asked, sensing her thoughts. "Zeus is growing impatient with the fact that our unit has been home for so long," Philomena answered. "He sent me to ask what time today you will be ready to depart." "You explained our plan?" Theocles asked. "I was fairly clear when we arrived last week that we would be taking an extended rest before redeployment. The borders are far from quiet, but the Titan's main force is holding back. We won't get another opportunity for a rest like this again. I intend to take it." "Ares is advising assault," Philomena answered, "and Zeus wants our unit on the front lines when the order comes down. Michael and Gabriel's forces are spread too thin, and Uriel's scouts are bogged down in the north. An assault would be foolish. Since our forces joined the Olympian army, we've managed to stabilize the border and even gain ground in key positions. We shouldn't press our luck against the Titan's main forces without more intelligence. Artemis is already sending out scouts, Philomena said. In fact, she sent Gragian and Joran to the forest to the south to prevent any incursions there. Theocles shot Philomena a sideways glance. The Dryads in the forest have never favored either side, he said, and they routinely kill scouts who delve too deep into their woods. Even with a direct order from Artemis, I fail to see why such a move would be necessary. Theocles remained silent for a few moments after speaking, his eyes facing the Olympian child. Despite looking directly at the boy, his attention appeared to be elsewhere. Philomena could see him mulling the information over in his mind. "Have you recorded any scouting activity from the forest recently?" he finally asked. "Artemis always has Fays fluttering back and forth to and from the forest," she answered. "I think a collection of them arrived earlier this week and quickly departed." Theocles nodded, then turned away from the Olympian child's body entirely. "Very well," he said. "You may inform Zeus that I will be prepared to march for the border as soon as his own Olympian-led units are ready to move out with me. If he wants to posture for an assault while Gregane and Joran tramp around the forest, then we might as well encourage him to put on a good show." Philomena nodded and turned to leave. After taking only a few steps, however, she turned back to face her companion. "You've been coming here often," she observed. "Is there something you are looking for in this hall?" "Clarity," Theocles answered. "We are all the Father's children, and yet we see so few young ones like this around the camp. I am hoping for a day when this kind of youth is all too common." Theocles offered a half-hearted smile, then moved to follow Philomena out of the great hall. "Who knows? Maybe the Father will permit the angels to procreate when this war is all over. We have certainly lost enough lives that creating a few new ones would be a welcome change." Philomena only smiled and pushed the double doors of the great hall open again. Once outside, the two went their separate ways. Theocles to gather his troops, Philomena to report her companion's message to the Olympian king.
You're listening to Big World Network.
Music by Kevin MacLeod.